But at first, things are jovial. We're joking, having a great time with the guys. They're cracking jokes. We're cracking jokes. How does somebody get a job like this? I mean, how are you making a living out of breaking the buildings? That's so cool.
Sounds like you guys are good. So he did get a hold of them, so
okay.
Are they good to go?
They're good to go.
And then when the sheriff comes up, you can tell that he's got a reputation, I think, because one of the deputies says, "Oh, this ought to be good," and maybe another shuts off his body cam.
They've been pretty cooperative, so we just walk them over.
Okay.
And even then, we were like, it's okay, you guys are just doing your job. You don't have to apologize.
Appreciate you being cooperative with us. No worries. Just doing your job.
We're not too worried about it. Do whatever you got to do.
They cuff us. They start walking us over, processing, booking us.
Cops respond to a silent alarm coming from within their own county courthouse, where they find intruders locked inside a dark, closed building. After taking them into custody, the burglars tell the cops that they're actually professional hackers hired by the state judicial branch to test the courthouse's security measures.
Found the door was open when we got there.
So it was pretty much very vulnerable from the very beginning.
Yeah, literally would take anybody on the street walking up and pulling on that door, and it was wide open. Yeah.
Then the local sheriff arrives, apparently embarrassed by the fact that the hired hackers were able to just walk right in an unlocked door in the middle of the night, and angry that he wasn't informed of the security testing ordered by the state.
This is a county problem. It's a county courthouse. You realize that?
As Iowa courts contracted us, and they said this is the address along with 3 to 5 others. Test security and then report back with our findings.
Oh, maybe a guy will come behind you out. This isn't the Iowa court's property.
So instead of releasing them, he orders handcuffs put on them and has them taken to the county jail and charged with burglary.
Gary even asked the sheriff, like, are you just holding us until you figure this out, or are you actually pressing charges? And the sheriff goes, "Oh no, I'm pressing charges against you guys."
Then it gets even worse. The bureaucrats at the state judicial branch then get worried about their own jobs, and they attempt to throw the hackers they hired under the bus.
We were completely disavowed and said that we went rogue and we broke into all this stuff and nobody knew why we were there.
Initially claiming that they did not authorize the burglary, even though they did. Eventually, the state Supreme Court admits they hired the hackers and apologized for the confusion, but the county still wanted to prosecute the 2 innocent hackers who were caught in the middle of this government power struggle. Even up through the day before trial, the county prosecutor was refusing to drop the charges. He finally had to, though, because they were innocent. So then the 2 hackers filed a civil lawsuit, which took years to litigate. Now that just settled, with the 2 hackers receiving $600,000 from the county for their false arrest. This is an absolutely insane story out of Iowa. I got a chance to interview the 2 hackers as well as their attorney, and I got all of the case information from their lawsuit as well as the criminal case. Here's how all of this started. Back in 2015, the Iowa State Judicial Branch retained this security company named Coalfire to perform a cybersecurity analysis of the Iowa court system. Even though we don't hear about these things very often, this happens all over the world. It happens in every state. You just don't hear about it, and here we only heard about it because of how things went sideways. So this security company, Coalfire, did their thing for the Iowa Judicial Branch back in 2015, and they tested the security. They issued their report to the state at that time. So fast forward to 2019, the Iowa Judicial Branch then again retains Coalfire to perform cybersecurity analysis of the Iowa court system to ensure that the people of Iowa are safe, that their private sensitive information is safe from criminals. So documents are prepared, a service order is prepared, rules of engagement were prepared, and they were discussed between Coalfire employees and employees of the Iowa Judicial Branch. The request by the Iowa Judicial Branch was for these employees to test the security of the Iowa Judicial Branch, including the district court level facilities, courthouses, and determine what weaknesses, if any, existed at those facilities. The rules of engagement included external, internal, and application testing. The rules of engagement also included social engineering activities that involved physical attacks as part of physical security assessments. A physical attack includes lockpicking. These physical attacks were limited to 3 specific locations, including the Dallas County Courthouse, and were authorized to be conducted during the day and evening. In other words, these employees were authorized to break into the Dallas County Courthouse at night when it was closed. So the Iowa Judicial Branch approved the surreptitious entry of the courthouse building. This was approved both in writing and in oral communication with the coal fire employees.
Yeah, I mean, so just background on our company. We have project managers. Gary was the director, and then we have higher ups, legal team, everyone that vets, through the contract and sales process. So many people in our chain that were aware of the testing, that knew what we're up to. The project manager and anybody else on the call, when we're going through, stepping through the rules of engagement with the client, heard the client asking, yes, we're looking for covert entry. We want you to break into these 5 buildings that we're designating. Please focus on after hours testing. We want to see what the risk is if somebody tries to break in overnight. Lock picking's allowed, RFID, bypass, all the works.
What was the mission that night when you got to that courthouse?
The engagement was full scope red team, which includes some virtual testing that occurred in the month prior leading up to the engagement. Allows us to do things like OSINT, which is open source intelligence gathering. But really the objective of the test is, as a red team, perform adversarial simulations. So show us through an attacker's eyes what they would see, how they would compromise us, what risks we have, and then the impact if something is compromised. So realistically, that means come on site and we define rules of engagement, what we're allowed and not allowed to do. But the general objective is see if you can gain access and then capture whatever flags that the client sets. So in this case, access to the network, sensitive files, information, rooms that you shouldn't be able to be in, courthouses in general at night. Are you able to gain access? So,
and a big part of what clients pay us for is our experience and how we look at things differently than other people. So we truly are attempting to be adversarial simulation, but we're also kind of like the TV shows where they've got the safety pins, or not the safety pins, but the push pins on the wall, and they're taking the yarn and they're trying to connect the dots and things like that. That's a big part of what we do. So we go in and we look through everything that we can get a hold of. So what we do is a little bit different than like an actual criminal, because they're looking for a specific thing. They've got a target, either a target of opportunity, they're looking for money, they're looking for guns or something. They've got a target. We look at everything ad nauseum. We go through every drawer that we can get into, every computer that we can get into, and then we start putting those push pins on the wall, and then we start drawing or taking the yarn from push pin to push pin and seeing what we can connect to see what is the worst thing that we could possibly do or the worst thing that we could happen. And then in our reporting, we tell them all of the gnarly things that we were able to find and like what some of those worst case scenarios could be, because you don't actually really know what an attacker is coming after you for. So we try to come up with every feasible scenario that we could possibly think of as a bad guy, using our experience over decades of doing this to try to show them the worst outcome we could have. And so an example of that would be, there was an organization that hired us, and we just through that process that we do, we figured out that they were using rubber stamps from the CEO and the executive VP of the company for everything. And we ended up finding where that rubber stamp was. We find their documentation, and then we started transferring everything in that company over to ourselves using that rubber stamp, up into include the financials for the organization. We ended up taking, like, I think it was the company Tesla, vans, scooters, like all of the documentation, all of their titles, everything signed by them with the way that they signed it, using the stamp that they signed, everything. And so those are some of the things that we're trying to do. So especially like in the courthouse or previous courthouses, there was a lot of things that we found. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say everything that we found, and Marty will yell at me if I'm wrong or right. But anything that you could think of that would be in a courthouse that bad people should not have access to, we had access to. And when I mean everything, I mean literally everything. We had access to it.
This was set to begin on September 8th, 2019, and was to end by September 13th of 2019. The Iowa Judicial Branch specifically did not want local law enforcement or security persons to be notified in advance about the penetration testing that was being performed by these two employees. But in order to protect them from being arrested, for instance, the rules of engagement included a letter of authorization signed by employees of the State Court Administrator's Office of the Iowa Judicial Branch. They were to carry this letter with them and show the letter to any law enforcement who showed up in order to avoid arrest. As they were contracted to do, the employees tested the security systems at the Polk County Courthouse and adjacent buildings, as well as the Iowa Judicial Branch building in Des Moines during the period of September 8th through 10th of 2019. This testing included them leaving a business card at the Judicial building in Des Moines after breaching the security system there. In fact, on the morning of September 10th of 2019, an employee of the Iowa Judicial Branch acknowledged and congratulated the employees for entering the Judicial building without being detected. So they proceeded to now try to breach the Dallas County Courthouse on the evening of September 10th/11th of 2019. So when the two coal fire employees, Justin and Glenn, arrived at the scene at the Dallas County Courthouse, they found that one of the doors to the courthouse was unlocked. So what about this courthouse in particular? You arrive, you're going to test vulnerabilities. What did you find?
Found the door was open when we got there.
So it was pretty much very vulnerable from the very beginning.
Yeah, literally would take anybody on the street walking up and pulling on that door, and it was wide open. Yeah.
So you guys at some point purposefully triggered the alarm to wait for their response.
Not necessarily to wait for, not to be pedantic, but yes, we tripped the alarm, and then we hung out inside the building, continued testing, and then waited to see if anyone did respond.
So to continue with their testing, they closed and locked that door, and then they went inside and they began the process of trying to enter. No physical damage was caused to the doors. During their efforts, they intentionally tripped the silent alarm, and they recognized that the silent alarm had been tripped, and then they waited for law enforcement to arrive.
They tried to arrive and tried to gain access, and they were unable to get into the building, actually. So we were out there on the third floor trying to be in a safe spot and waiting for them. And we just couldn't understand, it felt like an eternity. 5 or 10 minutes went by. They responded almost immediately, but then we're hanging out. And we found out later through body cam footage, they were unable to use their RFID cards to gain access.
Nothing would work. So they literally could not get into the building, which is why we stayed up top for so long, because we expected them to make entry, and we didn't want to spook anybody or run into them. And so we were talking the whole time when we were in there, thinking that the officers would end up being in the building, and we had to make contact with them and then ask them if they would like us to come out or come in. And he's like, yeah, we can't get in. You guys are going to have to come out. So we left the building because they couldn't get to us.
At 12:40 a.m., Justin and Gary come down the interior stairs of the south side of the courthouse with their hands raised, and they meet with Deputy Sanchez.
I've got him here on the south side. How's it going?
Good. We just came to find you. We're security. We work with coal fire, and the court system they're having us test all the buildings.
They're what?
Having us test all the buildings.
Okay.
Security.
All right. You guys want to step out here?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Saw the car out there, so we thought we'd come find you. So
Yeah.
Come in the building and go through all the
Yeah. It's just a little odd at 12:30.
And so you guys already had paperwork with you from the state judicial folks that you could give to local law enforcement, just saying that we hired them, they're supposed to be there, right?
Yes, we did. That's pretty routine. In the industry, we call it a get out of jail free letter, which turns out maybe a bit of a misnomer nowadays. But we had all that paperwork on us, provided it to them, gave them IDs. They looked us up, no criminal record, called our point of contacts that are on that letter and verified that, yep, we're working for the state.
Justin and Gary identify themselves, they provide their driver's licenses, and they give these cops their letter of authorization, their get-out-of-jail-free card that was signed by the representatives of the Iowa Judicial Branch, and they give that to Deputy Sanchez.
My ID for my company as well.
Okay,
Yeah, business cards too if you need it. You can take it if you want.
that's fine. I'm just reading through your little note here. I want to look at that when I run there.
Deputy Sanchez gives the letter to Sergeant Vanderleest.
We're security consultants contracted by Iowa courts to do testing of certain facilities.
Okay.
This included.
Deputy Sanchez then calls in the driver's license information to dispatch.
Dallas 23-2.
Deputies Marchant, Vanderleest, and Sanchez then look at and discuss the letter of authorization, the get out of jail free card.
Yeah, it seems kind of dangerous that they didn't let us know, because about another 10 seconds, you're going to have about 5 cops coming in with guns pointed at you.
That's why we said we figured we'd come out.
We do this a lot. That's why we came out and we're looking for you guys, yeah.
That's a first.
And they turn around to us and says, all right, guys, it all checks out. You guys are good to go. And so they actually free and cleared us and, approved us and let us go from the scene. And we chose to stick around and try to offer advice and just discuss, law enforcement, their role in security, and how they can help secure things a little bit better.
And it's pretty common for, I don't even want to say, I would say it's commonplace rather than saying it's pretty common, but it's commonplace for us to perform that testing and not involve law enforcement. We've literally robbed banks where we've set the alarm off and the police officers come, but as soon as we know that the alarm has been set off, we'll call our client and we'll say, hey, we set the alarm off. Can you please contact law enforcement? Let us know that we're testing the facility and that we're not actual bank robbers. And then we've got an SOP for things like that. Like, we go outside and we wait for law enforcement to show up. We don't want them coming through the building and trying to clear the building, not knowing what's going on. We don't want to spook anybody or put anybody in a position of danger, them much less ourselves. So we've had moments with law enforcement where they thought we were robbing the bank, and we met them outside, and everything is always de-escalated very, very, very quickly, and everybody was always very professional. And this actually wasn't any different. The officers that responded were extraordinarily professional. Just one bad apple.
And that was the actual sheriff of that county.
Correct.
So between 12:41 a.m. and 12:54 a.m., one or more deputies have calm conversations with Gary and Justin. The topics of these conversations include why they were there, what they had found when they arrived, their job duties as part of this project, and so-called war stories regarding the work that they do. During these conversations, beginning at around 12:45 a.m., Justin Wynn explains that besides the letter of authorization, he also has on his laptop in his backpack the rules of engagement and the service order provided by the Iowa State Judicial Branch, and he offers to let the deputies see them.
Iowa courts didn't give you any kind of documentation or anything?
That's the documentation they give us to do the testing for when you guys show up, or if we walk into on-site security or something of that nature. I mean, we've got a
something
service
more
order,
on my laptop. Yeah, we have the rules of engagement, our service order, everything that's contracted with our company with Iowa courts.
Right.
You want to see a little bit more?
Yeah, because this paper is just signed by basically your CIO, your director, and your manager.
that's the Iowa court CIO and director. Those are authorizing it, yes, sir.
Okay.
And it should have their point of contact on there.
Yeah.
You can give them calls, something like that.
Free to wake them up.
Yeah, I think I will. Just to confirm. Not that I don't believe you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doing your job, right?
Sergeant Vanderleest acknowledges the offer, but he does not request to see the laptop or look in the backpack. The questions asked by the deputies include, how does one get a job like that? And what's the craziest story that you guys have doing this?
So how do you guys get in?
We were able to shim one of the latches on the far side.
On the north side of the building?
The opposite side, yeah. The north side.
Okay.
So you got in just by jimmying the latch?
Yes, sir.
That's not good.
Yeah, it's way more often the case than it isn't.
Did you have to hit a star or pound after your deal?
Actually, yeah, the far door was unlocked when we walked up.
It was. We pushed it shut to break in.
The north door was?
Yes, sir. So that's what we report on. We come on site for things like this. Can we break in, or is it unlocked as we get here? And that door, for whatever reason, when it closes, it did not latch and extend that latch properly into the strike plate. So we were able to just open that right up. And then we tested it, and then we could shim it open.
But you guys shimmy it open.
A little plastic cutting board.
I can show you.
Well, maybe that'll be good that way in case I need to come in, because obviously my damn card doesn't work to get my ass in here.
Yep.
No, I'm just kidding.
Well, no, it's kind of, I mean, it's what we do. It's fun.
How does one get a job like that?
Yeah, it's coveted positions. Yeah.
So, like, literally, it's just a cutting board you get from Amazon.
Yeah.
And because of the way that the latch is for, like, the crash bars, you feed this through, like, on the top, and then you come down, and then when you hit the latch, you pull it, and then it falls over the latch, and then you go like this, and it just pushes the latch in. If the latch is working right, or there's a dead latch along with it, like those smaller latches on the big latch, then it won't depress. And then you can't get in that way. You got to actually reach in and then pull the crash bar open. But most of the time, you can just get in with something like that, pull the latch from the backside, and open the door.
Nice.
So what's the craziest story that you guys have of doing this? Been tased
You actually
or-
had cops come in and draw down on you?
Never.
No?
Never.
We've
Oh,
had
you
guys,
almost did tonight.
we've had guys doing federal facilities, and they've been chased through with
Yeah.
SWAT teams before, and they never got caught on theirs.
Really?
The SWAT team responded by investigating every room that had an activated light, so motion sensor rooms, and they went through, and because our boys were moving so slowly through that room, they never tripped the motion sensor. SWAT team never investigated those rooms, and so they were able to evade the entire day.
Whatchamacallit got drawn up?
Everything seems to be going okay. Shortly before the arrival of Sheriff Leonard, the communications between Justin and Gary and the various law enforcement officers are friendly, cooperative, and they're non-confrontational. At no time before Sheriff Leonard arrived on the scene did any of the deputies ask to see the backpacks. So before the sheriff arrived, there really was no problem at all. Everything had gone as planned. Justin and Gary were safely found. They were verified by the responding cops, and they were about to be sent on their way. After reviewing their get out of jail free letter, Sergeant Vanderleet contacts one of the individuals who had signed this letter of authorization, who was later identified as Andrew Shirley. Mr. Shirley, who works for the Iowa Judicial Branch, verifies to the officers that Justin and Gary are acting within the scope of the contract and that the letter of authorization covered the situation at the Dallas County Courthouse. So at 12:53 a.m., Sergeant Vanderleest tells Deputy Aaron Sanchez, Deputy Marchant, Deputy Hawk, and another person identified as Ray that he has now spoken with the Chief Security Officer for the Iowa courts, confirming that Justin and Gary were indeed working under a contract with the Iowa Judicial Branch.
Ray is on scene.
Just leave a message. And no one answered.
No, he answered. I talked to him.
Oh.
Doug did?
No, I called the chief security officer with Iowa courts. That's on his contact numbers on that paper. And he confirmed that, yeah, they just contracted these guys, this company.
In response, Deputy Marchant states, "I want a job like that."
This must be the first one.
A job like
One of
that.
the first ones in the state. And he's like, just don't say anything to anybody because they're going to be tested a lot more.
Nothing like giving us a heads up or...
I'm surprised they didn't give Doug a heads up, but not to tell anybody else. Just
Well, no, because
Doug
then
had-
Doug's gonna make sure and have some. That's the whole point.
most people would. Yeah. I don't know if Doug would, but most people would.
That would be a fun ass job, though. Just go around breaking.
break in.
Until you get freaking tased or passed or something or shot by John Payne.
Deputy Sanchez then asks, "Are they good to go?" And he's told, yep, they're good to go. On the video, Sergeant Vanderleest is aware that Sheriff Leonard is on his way, but he doesn't need to wait for him before letting Justin and Gary leave.
So you just waiting for the sheriff then?
Huh?
Are you just waiting for the sheriff? Or are they good to go?
Yeah, they're good to go.
I heard he was en route. So.
I think dispatch. Well, yeah, they call check stuff.
Yeah.
So where's all that information go?
It goes to
Sounds
us.
like you guys are good.
To
So
our-
he did get a hold of him. So
Okay.
So Deputy Sanchez tells Justin and Gary that they're good to leave. Deputy Sanchez then shuts off his body cam. Even though they were told that they were good to leave, Justin and Gary stuck around and they were happy to answer any other questions the deputies had. And if Sheriff Leonard had never showed up, they would have left. They never would have been arrested. So you stuck around. Everything's cool. You could have left. The actual elected sheriff of Dallas County shows up. It then goes in a completely different direction.
Yeah. So if you have the body cam footage, I don't know if you had a chance to review it all. I'm sure there's hours of it. But at first, things are jovial. We're joking, having a great time with the guys. They're cracking jokes, we're cracking jokes, and just really cool exchange. They're interested. How does somebody get a job like this? I mean, how are you making a living out of breaking the buildings? That's so cool. And then when the sheriff comes up, you can tell that he's got a reputation, I think, because one of the deputies says, "Oh, this ought to be good," and maybe another shuts off his body cam, maybe trying to prevent the recording of evidence, whatever you want to call it. And then, the light definitely went out of the room, and the tone took a turn for the worse.
And why did the sheriff show up? None of the law enforcement personnel on the scene had requested that the sheriff come to the scene. On the scene at the Dallas County Courthouse before Sheriff Leonard arrived, there were 5 deputies from his sheriff's office and 1 ADL police officer. On the videos, none of these 6 law enforcement officers ever evidenced any interest nor voiced any desire to arrest Justin and Gary before Sheriff Leonard arrived. But before Justin and Gary could leave, Dallas County Sheriff Chad Leonard arrives at 12:56 a.m. When Leonard arrives, the situation changes. At 12:56 a.m., as Sheriff Leonard is arriving at the courthouse, Sergeant Vanderleest, while turning off his phone, tells Deputy Marchant that Sheriff Leonard is not happy, and that Leonard is claiming it's not the fucking court's property, it's the county's property.
Who's that pulling up?
Chad, he's not happy.
No?
He's like, that's not the fucking court's property, that's the county's property.
Well, we'll let him deal with this one then.
Yeah.
Looked like he came in kind of fast.
Yeah.
As Sheriff Leonard arrives in his vehicle at the courthouse, Deputy Marchant states this ought to be good.
So their job is to walk around and...
Professional burglars.
That's really...
This ought to be good.
And rather than continue to record, Deputy Marchant states, I better shut my videotape off. And he does exactly that, turning off his body cam.
Maybe I better shut my videotape off.
And by the way, Deputy Marchant shutting off his body cam is in fact a violation of his department policies. So at approximately 12:57 a.m., Sheriff Leonard approaches Justin and Gary on the south side stairs of the courthouse. He folds his arms, and the following dialogue occurs.
You realize this isn't a court property. This is a county property. It's a county courthouse. You realize that? You don't realize this is a county courthouse?
No, sir.
Wow.
This is the one they gave us.
That's Iowa courts contracted us. They said this is the address along with 3 to 5 others. This is one of them.
So your job, come break in?
Test security and then report after their findings.
Oh, maybe a guy will come find you out. This isn't the Iowa court's property.
At 12:58 a.m., less than 45 seconds after arriving at the south side stairs, Sheriff Leonard turns to Officer Wright and he says, "You got him or what?" Officer Wright responds, "Me?"
You got him or what?
Me?
We're going to take him in an interview anyway. We're going to, you got IDs or whatever?
Officer Wright begins to talk to other deputies that this is a county issue. It's your guys' arrest. It's county property, right?
It's your guys' It's county property, right? It's yours property, isn't it?
Huh?
It's county property, isn't it?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
This continues with Officer Wright continuing to state it's county property, and I don't know why I'm taking them in. At 12:58 a.m., Sheriff Leonard walks away from the stairs and can be heard in the background telling other deputies shortly after, this is county property. This isn't the state of Iowa's property or anything like that. So you're going to arrest them for trespassing. They're going to jail.
This is county property. This isn't the state of Iowa court's property or anything like that. So you're going to arrest them for trespassing. They're going to jail.
At 1 a.m., Officer Wright has the following conversation with Deputy Hawk and Deputy Sanchez. He says, well, you guys got enough people on the scene. Hawk says, you just want to get out of here so you don't have to deal with it. Sanchez says, I hear he pulled the it's county property.
Oh, you guys got enough people on scene?
No, you're just trying to get out of here so you don't have to deal with it.
Yeah, he already pulled this county property.
Yes, it is. I don't have keys to get in here.
We don't either.
You're supposed to have them. You just used to open the door, didn't you?
No.
Got me. I'll be around. I got enough people here.
Bye.
Later. Knock you out.
At 1:01 a.m., Officer Wright gets a call from dispatch, and he uses that as an excuse to leave the scene. He then shuts off his body cam a little after, and when he returns to his vehicle, Officer Wright can be heard on his dash cam stating, "I'm not arresting them."
I'm not arresting.
But Sheriff Leonard wanted to arrest them, even though he knew they were completely innocent. Why? Because he was apparently butthurt about the state sending these hackers into what he thought was his courthouse without telling him. Leonard knew that these guys were working for the benefit of the state of Iowa, that they had been authorized by the state of Iowa judicial branch to enter that building for the purpose of testing the court's security system, that they were simply doing their job. However, Leonard refused to recognize the authority of the Iowa judicial branch to permit them to perform that testing at the Dallas County Courthouse. So Sheriff Leonard ordered his deputies to arrest these guys.
Gary even asked the sheriff, like, are you just holding us until you figure this out, or are you actually pressing charges? And sheriff goes, "Oh no, I'm pressing charges against you guys."
At 1:03 a.m., a conversation takes place between Deputy Marchant and Sheriff Leonard, who has his phone to his ear, about how these two men entered the building. In response, the sheriff says, "Yeah, they're going to jail. Arrest them, charge them. They're going. This is bullshit."
Yeah, so they're going to arrest and charge them. I'll call Chuck. Let him know what they're doing.
Okay.
They're going. This is bullshit. We've never had anybody come in and protect them.
In response, Deputy Marchant says they've been pretty cooperative, so we can just walk them over. To which Sheriff Leonard says, "Cuff them."
They've been pretty cooperative, so we can just walk them over. They've been pretty cooperative, so we can just walk them over. Okay.
You're going to take your backpacks off, just cuff them up and walk them over.
Yeah, just cuff them. Yeah.
And you and I guess we'll
Do some paperwork.
Yep.
So at 1:04 a.m., these two men are arrested.
All right, gentlemen, go ahead and take the backpacks off. Drop down to the ground.
Say that call didn't go well, huh?
Nope, it did not.
All right.
Go ahead and turn around for me.
Sure.
Place you under arrest. Charged with burglary tonight. Make some phone calls. Get over to the jail. Do you have any weapons that are on you?
I do have a pocket knife in my front right pocket.
Okay. How about you, sir?
I don't believe so. We got some gear that needs to be hit.
You guys got a vehicle out here?
Yes, sir.
We do. Okay.
We're probably gonna hold on to your tools of operation. We're gonna give you guys can have opportunities that you can write some statements tonight as well, okay?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah. So tell me about the arrest.
At some point, they just walked up, and one of the officers, at least the officer to me that handcuffed, he's like, "Hey man, I'm real sorry about this. we tried to get him not to cuff you, but the sheriff's pretty adamant about cuffing you and we walking you over there." And even then, we were like, "It's okay. You guys are just doing your job. You don't have to apologize."
Appreciate you being cooperative with us.
No worries. Just doing your job.
It's not a big deal. Like we'll get this sorted out. We're not too worried about it. Do whatever you got to do. To the point where I carry a handcuff key on my key ring, and I even told him, I was like, "Well, just to do your due diligence, so you guys don't get anything later, you might want to take my keys out of my pocket. I've got a handcuff key." So we were extraordinarily professional through the entire thing. We worked with them through the whole thing.
And did they actually take you to jail?
Oh yeah.
Tell me about that.
So yeah, they cuff us. They start walking us over, processing, booking us. Things turn adversarial from, I guess, their point of view, and we're still trying to remain professional throughout it. I think we did a good job at that. But at some point, Gary even asked the sheriff, like, "Are you just holding us until you figure this out, or are you actually pressing charges?" And the sheriff goes, "Oh no, I'm pressing charges against you guys." And I think at that mind he made up, it was going to be burglary and whatever else he could get to stick, which was possession of burglary tools.
Then they're walked over to the county jail, and as they're walked over, the following conversation takes place.
Yeah, sheriff isn't very happy tonight.
Yeah, fair enough. Never good to wake up the sheriff, huh?
Nope.
After the arrest at 1:06 a.m., as Deputy Myers heads back to his vehicle, he talks to Sheriff Leonard, who makes the following comments.
This belongs to the court of the county. This don't belong to the state.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to jail. I talked to Chuck, told him we're bringing him to jail, and he said, okay. Burden of proof's on them. They can take it.
I'll try. I don't know if I can discuss it anymore, but I'll try.
This shit just pisses me off.
I've never heard of this before.
This is bullshit. This isn't even...
In his deposition in the civil lawsuit, Sheriff Chad Leonard described his emotions that evening as, quote, frustrated and offended. He said that he took it personal, calling the courthouse my building. The sheriff conceded that he never spoke with a state employee before ordering the arrest of Gary and Justin. And after he ordered the arrest of Gary and Justin, Sheriff Leonard had 2 phone calls that morning in the early morning hours of September 11th, 2019, with one of the state officials who was listed in the letter of authorization. In these calls, Sheriff Leonard testified that Mr. Shirley was adamant that Gary and Justin were supposed to be at the Dallas County Courthouse that night, that they were just doing their job. During the calls, Mr. Shirley questioned the authority of the sheriff to arrest Gary and Justin, telling him that we have offices out of that building. Shirley told the sheriff that he would later regret arresting Gary and Justin. And the sheriff was butthurt about that also. In a meeting later on September 11th, 2019, with the Chief Justice of the Iowa Supreme Court, Sheriff Leonard complained about the manner in which Mr. Shirley had spoken to him. This resulted in an apology given to him by the Chief Justice for Mr. Shirley's alleged disrespect. So Gary and Justin are arrested, their property is seized, they're booked and held in the county jail for approximately 20 hours. They were initially held on only $5,000 bonds, but at the initial appearance, their bonds were increased to $50,000 each. They were each charged with burglary in the 3rd degree, as well as the illegal possession of burglar tools. The criminal charges resulted in significant media coverage, which included Gary and Justin's mugshots being splashed across the front pages of local and national publications. So at the bond hearing, despite knowing that Gary and Justin were in fact authorized to be in the courthouse, Sheriff Leonard went to the bond hearing and allowed the magistrate to believe the opposite. As a result of this cover-up, the magistrate had increased the size of the bond from $5,000 each to $50,000 each. And when she later learned that Gary and Justin had been hired by the Iowa Judicial Branch to test the security at that courthouse, the magistrate was frustrated that she had not been alerted to this because it was pertinent information for the purposes of setting bond. She said that had she been alerted to all the facts known by the sheriff at that time, that she would have considered releasing Gary and Justin just on their own recognizance at that time.
We're in jail overnight, wait until the morning, and then that's when our arraignment is. So we're walked over in a chain gang, so still orange jumpsuit. They have cuffs on us with the chain going through a belt loop, which is chained down your ankle. So stutter stepping the entire way over there with a crew of however many people, about 8 people. Gary goes up first, and magistrate's kind of reading over, the charges and reviewing what had happened. And just is bewildered. She can't understand that guys are breaking in her courthouse, and we're telling her that we're hired by a security company, and she is not having any of it. The sheriff was in attendance, and it became pretty clear at some point he had withheld information from her. Obviously, did not tell her that we were hired by the state. He had made phone calls the night during when we were being arrested, and then we found out retroactively. Even that morning, 7 a.m.-ish, he had a call with somebody that he trusted and knew and been working with. And that guy was telling him, yeah, Sheriff, these guys are hired by the state. I mean, they're working within contract, doing their job. And so kind of the opposite. Not only did he not disclose that information, he was working pretty closely with the county attorney. And it was him that went up to the magistrate and said, these guys are a flight risk. They're breaking into courthouses. We recommend that you raise the bail. So they did from $5,000 to $50,000 a piece. Gary made his best plea that he could, and she just shot him down. I went up later and then corroborated the entire story, expanded upon it, told her who we're working for, the company that we work with, and we're from Florida and Seattle. I mean, it doesn't make sense that two guys are driving into the middle of nowhere, Iowa, to break into a courthouse here. The more likely answer is here, man, like, we're hired by the state, we're testing security. And you can see she kind of hesitated at that point. It got a little bit more believable, but still made the decision to actually formally press the charges against us.
Did you tell the judge that you had paperwork like this get out of jail free card?
We were telling them we're hired by the state. They take all your possessions. Everything was booked the night before.
This wasn't like a scenario where the sheriff wasn't sure if we were actually hired by the state or not. It even shows him on webcam footage right after he arrested us. They can't do this. The state can't send people out like this and test our buildings without our knowledge. Like, what the hell are they thinking? Like, he's mad at the state at this point. While we were in jail before he pressed charges, like, I even asked him, like, haven't you talked? He's like, oh, if I already talked to them, I already called them. Yeah, that's not the point.
So I take it you guys were able to bond out at some point.
20 hours later, yep, our company came through for us.
But not after we were completely disavowed and said that we went rogue and we broke into all this stuff and nobody knew why we were there.
Who said that? The state or your company?
The state.
So it was a little bit different once we get arraigned, and then we find out, at some point that day that the state had gone onto the company portal and deleted the contract that they had with us. And then throughout, I mean, just the CYA process, just trying to say, we don't know who these guys are. We never hired them. Or as things started leaking out, yes, we hired them, but we didn't expect them to come on site here in Iowa and break into places. And then as more contracts get out, it says, yep, lock picking, these locations, covert entry. I mean, it's all listed in the paperwork. So kind of bewildering. But that just goes to show kind of how both entities or parties that were fighting each other, we were being used as leverage in the middle of that, just because we were the guys there, somebody that he could arrest and try to put in prison for 7 years, and use us kind of as scapegoats to attack the state in a turf war.
I think if they could have got away with it, I truly believe, had we not had the documentation and the paperwork, and had we not actually been able to computer and been like, you just can't erase things and it just doesn't just go away forever, right? Like, our IT people had to go back and then get the files from the history after they tried to erase them, right? But I think if they would have been able to do that, I wouldn't be surprised me if we would have stayed in jail for a very long time, because they would have said, we never hired him, prove it, we have no contract. The sheriff, even though he saw the contract, would have just continued down that road because we broke into his jailhouse and he wasn't very happy, for his courthouse, and he wasn't very happy about it. Like, everybody in this scenario was completely fine with leaving us in prison, as long as their job wasn't at fault, or they didn't get a demerit, or their pride wasn't hurt. Like, totally cool with sending two completely innocent guys to jail for 7 years.
So did the state eventually admit that they had hired you guys? When did that occur, and what was required to get them to do it?
They kept, like Justin was saying, they kept retracting their statement. They released, they never hired us, they never asked us to do this, they don't have no idea who we were. And then our old company would release some information, and it would be out there for all the media to see, and then the state would have to erase that and then amend it and say, well, we did hire them, but they were out of scope. And then our company would release more information showing the scope, and then the state said, well, okay, so they were in scope, but we had no idea they were going to do it after hours. And then we would show more information that says anytime after hours, and they were like, okay, well, sure, yeah, maybe it was after hours, but completely misinterpretation of what they were going to do after hours. Like, they just kept amending it and kept backpedaling until eventually they were just kind of like, yeah, you're right, we did hire them, and they were supposed to be doing these things.
By 8 a.m. on September 11th, Sheriff Leonard received verified information that Gary and Justin had a contract with the state of Iowa and that everything was legitimate. But this did not stop Sheriff Leonard from continuing this charade that Gary and Justin were guilty of some crimes. He began with the Perry News in an article published after the bond hearing on September 11th. He said, "It's a strange case. We're still investigating this thing." The following morning, September 12th, Sheriff Leonard sent an email intended for all sheriffs throughout the state of Iowa. He sent the email to Sean Ireland, the secretary of the Iowa Sheriffs and Deputies Association. Despite claiming that he did not ask Deputy Ireland to share it with the media, it mysteriously found its way to the Des Moines Register newspaper by Wednesday, September 18th, and was published in an article the following day on September 19th. On or about September 26th, Sheriff Leonard was present at the meeting of the Central Committee of the Republican Party, and at that meeting, Sheriff Leonard, despite claiming that he never called Gary and Justin burglars, continued to claim that Gary and Justin were burglars and had committed a crime. He even exaggerated their presence by suggesting that they were acting like terrorists. He said they were wearing ski masks and he couldn't see their faces, which we know from watching the video footage was a complete lie. In articles published in the Perry News on October 30th and November 6th, Sheriff Leonard was quoted saying, "I stand by the decision I made." He also stated, "I do look forward to informing the public of everything. I would just encourage people to not make an opinion until they have all the facts, and I assure you that all the facts are not out." On November 13th, an article appeared in Ars Technica, a cybersecurity online website. Sheriff Leonard was interviewed by the author. Sheriff Leonard sought to portray Gary and Justin as terrorists. He said they were crouched down like turkeys, peeking over the balcony. Here we are at 12:30 in the morning, confronted with the issue. On September 11th, no less, we have two unknown people in our courthouse, in a government building, carrying backpacks that remind me and several other deputies of maybe the pressure cooker bombs. This statement was made even though, in reality, no deputy, officer, or sheriff asked to look at the backpacks before even arresting Gary and Justin. How long did it take to get the charges completely dismissed?
I think the day before the trial, or maybe it was a Friday, and I think whatever that portion of the legal thing is, it was on a Monday, and I think it was a Friday afternoon at like 4 o'clock Pacific time is when they finally dropped all the charges. Literally.
If it took until the day before trial, I'm assuming that we're talking a number of months here.
6. It's about 6 months.
So still for 6 months, the prosecutor's office they're still trying to prosecute you up until the day before trial. I mean, did the prosecutor, not believe that you guys had been hired by the state, or was this sort of just like a retaliation against the state?
They kept playing ping pong. So the prosecutor would tell our attorney that it was the sheriff that refused to drop the charges, and he had no say in it because this was the sheriff's case. And then they would turn around and the sheriff would say, "Oh, it's not me. My hands are tied. These are good guys. This is all on the prosecutor." And so they just kept batting it back and forth on who was at fault. At some point, I think 4 months into it, they asked us if we would be okay with them dropping the charges to, I think it was criminal trespass, in which we told them to pound sand, that we weren't copying to anything because we hadn't done anything wrong.
And so eventually they just dismissed the charge, no pleas.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, was anyone from the state or the state judicial branch that had hired you guys initially doing anything to help you over this 6-month period?
I can't think of anything. You, Gary?
No.
So at the end of the day, these two guys, it's undisputed, are completely innocent. They never would have been arrested but for the fact that the sheriff showed up. He was butthurt that the state of Iowa judicial branch had sent these two hackers in there who undisputedly were just doing their jobs, which undisputedly is a job that is done all over the world, all over the country, a job that is necessary to protect people's private information, the security of the people of Dallas County, Iowa. All large governments do this. All large corporations do this. This is a thing, even if we don't hear about it. So even though these guys are doing their job, and that job is legitimate and was known to the state of Iowa, the sheriff has them arrested anyways and attempts to prosecute them for felonies. Even when he knows 100% that these guys were completely innocent, he still held it over their heads. So after the charges are inevitably dropped, these guys file a civil lawsuit. It takes years to litigate, and now it just settles $600,000. That's what this Sheriff Chad Leonard in Dallas County, Iowa, that's what he cost the taxpayers of his county, or at least their insurance policy. So meanwhile, where is Sheriff Leonard? Well, apparently he's in Florida enjoying the sunshine right now, while the people in Dallas County, Iowa, and really all of Iowa, are now more compromised and less safe because of his incompetency, because of his childish and tyrannical behavior. Has this ordeal made you decide not to ever test the security at a county courthouse ever again?
Not in Iowa.
It made a lot of our industry. So we're a tight knit industry. Hackers, offensive security professionals. There were so many people that rallied around us and were posting online that they're canceling their contracts with Iowa, that they're not going to do work with them, even for the virtual stuff. So, it's heartwarming to see, but it goes to show how crippling that can be if a state takes this posture. So, one, they arrested us after hiring us. The backlash from the community said, we're not going to work with the state of Iowa anymore if you guys are doing that.
Yeah, and meanwhile, like the people in Iowa, their data, their privacy is in more jeopardy because of these politicians and the sheriff in particular. I mean, that's sort of the irony of the whole thing.
Spot on. I'm glad that you get that takeaway immediately right away. I've had so many Iowans that come up to me. I attend a lot of conferences and travel around the country, and people come up to me and they say, "Man, I'm so sorry that this happened in Iowa of all places, but of course it would. I want you to know Iowans aren't like that, but we apologize for our government because apparently stuff like this is somewhat commonplace." But that is the tragedy behind all of this, is we found horrible vulnerabilities everywhere we went. None of that was discussed. I don't think that was widely disseminated. Our results, the report, nobody wanted to talk about that. And I would be surprised if everything from that report has been fixed. And like we're already saying, we've been back to Iowa since. And just by walking down the street, we can see, oh, there's a vulnerability there. There's a vulnerability there on facilities that we tested. So if I was a taxpayer in that situation, I would be livid. One, not only do we have to pay these guys out, and granted, it came from an insurance company, because we arrested them when they did nothing wrong. But now we have regulations in place that are going to prevent us from fixing or testing this ever again. We found stuff like just by a juror presiding over a case with the anonymous number system that they give you, so many controls were missing around that, that anybody that could just see that badge could unmask that juror, find out their home address, family members, points of contact, telephone number, all this PII. So if you are being tried for murder and you can just see your jury, and then you can go and find those guys and extort them or pressure them, with threat of death. I mean, as a juror, I would want that fixed. And it's wild to me that now that state never wants to do that type of testing. So as part of this, now that things have been corrected and we have this big victory for us, for our community, the last thing outstanding is for Iowa to roll back those regulations that prohibit testing.
And the absolute craziest thing about all of this is that following this settlement, when the news media is reporting on it, the county attorney, the county prosecutor there in Dallas County, Iowa, he is publicly defiant, still claiming not only that they did nothing wrong, which I've proven to you in this video that they absolutely did, he's claiming that if anyone ever tries to help the people of Iowa protect their private information, their courthouses, their public buildings ever again, he will again have them falsely arrested and maliciously prosecuted.
Dallas County Attorney Matt Scholes, on the other hand, feels differently about the decision. In a statement, he wrote, "The county does not admit liability and does not agree that it has any fault in this case." The county attorney also sent out a warning of his own. In his statement, Matt Scholes said, quote, "I'm putting the public on notice that if this situation arises again in the future, I will prosecute to the fullest extent of the law."
Absolutely insane level of ignorance. And this guy is still there. So if this is your public servant and you want to get rid of him and educate your fellow citizens, I will include all of the information I have on this case, at least eventually, at the blog post linked in the description below. And I'll try to update if anything else happens or I hear anything else. So you can follow along by subscribing both here and at the blog at thecivilrightslawyer.com. You can follow me on X at JohnBryanESQ. Remember, our rights don't end where your fear begins. Freedom is scary. Deal with it.